If you're a trainer or a coach, then you're probably interested to know what else you can do to keep your learners or your coachees motivated and engaged in your programs. And one answer to this is gamification. But if you're like me, you might have felt a little bit reluctant to go down this route because maybe it seems a bit complicated or it feels like you need specialist skills to do it. Well, I recently discovered that this need not be the case, and I want to share what I've learned with you. Hi, I'm Murray Cowell, a grizzled veteran of the training world, and I recently had the pleasure and the privilege of sitting down with Terry Pearce from Untold Play. Terry is an expert in gamification in learning design. It was a fascinating conversation, and Terry has really opened my eyes to how simple it can be to take a game-led approach to the design of your training and coaching programs. So take a look at the conversation, and I hope you'll find it as interesting as I did. It could transform the way that you design your training and coaching programs. Hi, I'm Murray Cowell. I run a program called the Training Business Accelerator, which helps trainers and coaches to find more clients and scale and grow their businesses.
Hi, I'm Terry Pearce, and I'm an expert on gamification and games-based learning.
And Terry and I are joining together this afternoon to have a conversation about where our work crosses over. And in particular, I've just recently migrated my program onto a learning management system. And so, Terry, I'm really interested to understand how gamification principles can make the learning experience a richer and more enjoyable experience for the learners and help them to stay on track.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's exactly the kind of thing gamification can really help with. I'm really excited to talk about it with you. Tell me what's your course. Tell me a little bit more about what the course is about, and then I think we can probably, see where you're probably already doing some things really well, but there's some things I'm sure we can help do even better.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a good start point. So it's a 6-module course, and the modules cover everything from setting out a business vision roadmap through implementing a lead generation system to make sure that the clients have got a steady stream of incoming clients, new clients into their business, how to differentiate themselves in a crowded marketplace because it's very competitive, both training and coaching, how to really get deep insights into what's motivating their ideal clients, and then how to market to those people in a way that really grabs and keeps their attention and helps to educate them along the way about how they can help them and how they can solve their problems, and how to hold elegant business development conversations so that they can close business without any sleazy selling. So that's the scope of the program.
Excellent. That sounds really good. And how's it kind of set up at the moment in terms of modules and things like
that? Well, maybe the best thing to do is to share my screen, if that's okay. And then I can show you what it looks like. So this is an example of one of the modules that my clients do. And as you can see, it's split into different sections, so different groupings, and each of those groupings has got a number of lessons in it. Each lesson contains some video content that explains the concepts. This is the introduction here, but there are some activities, assignments on here where, for example, here they're crafting their mission statement. They can download a template in some cases and then submit the assignment through here. So that's the overall structure of the program. What I'm really interested to understand from you, Terry, is what kind of gamification principles are available.
Great. And I'd be really happy. I can already see, I think there's a few places where some of the ideas from gamification could really help. I think for me, one of the things about gamification is that actually there's a lot of it that we tend to kind of do naturally anyway. And I'm sure that there are some things that you're already doing, either because you know a little bit about it already, just by being interested in it, or because it actually comes quite naturally. So just maybe tell me first, is there anything about the way that things are done on the program at the moment that you think kind of does maybe tap into that feeling that games give people, or the power that games have to kind of motivate people and get them to take certain actions?
Yeah, and I guess it's just a natural human activity, isn't it? Playing games. So we do sort of gravitate towards that. And there are a few things in here that occur to me that have got elements of gamification about them. So one of the first things that I invite people to do is to create their own game plan. So they've got a downloadable document here. And the reason I've done this is because one of the hardest things with online learning is staying motivated and staying on track. And so I've deliberately built into this a couple of elements that are intended to help people to do that.
And so, for example, this is just a basic Word document, and it lays out all the content of the program step after step and how much time is required to do that. But I encourage people to just pick a specific date when they're going to do each piece of content, and then to write that on their calendars and treat it as if it was a live event or a meeting with somebody, so they are not tempted to move it about. And what this means is that they're building, as it says, their own personal game plan. So they're deciding when they're going to do the activities, and then there's a checkbox, as you can see there, where they can tick it off as they've done it. And I encourage people to actually print this off and put it somewhere visible where they can see it all the time as a constant kind of visual reminder of what they're planning to do.
Great. I'm really glad that you've shown me this first, actually, because it gives me an opportunity to say something that I think is really important for people to understand about gamification, which is that it's not necessarily flashing, colorful characters and shooting things and all some of the things that are the most kind of memorable kind of things that people think of when they think of games. I think one of the reasons that games is a powerful source of inspiration for learning and for learning in very serious contexts like this is that games get people to do things, and it doesn't have to be by having some fantastic character. It can just be by some of the things that they do simply but do really well, like giving players a sense of progress. That's something you can draw inspiration from with games, and that's what you're doing here. You're giving them a framework where they're not just thinking, well, yeah, I've done some work and I've got some more left to do. They've got a visual marker and track of that, which most games do really well, and which a lot of the really powerful gamification frameworks offer different ways to kind of do that with. And I think also a personalization element there as well. So it's not just a framework; they're making it into their own. So there's a sense of ownership there, which again, most good games tend to give people a chance to own things and feel that they're theirs and customize and personalize them.
No, that's very true. So it gives them a sense of ownership, I guess, that it's not just any plan; it's their plan.
Definitely. Yeah.
The other thing that I think is somewhat game-like, when they go back to the home screen, there's a progress bar here that shows them how far they've got, and also each individual lesson is then ticked off, so they can see at a glance what they've done and what they've yet to do, and track their progress through the portal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's great thing to look for if you are looking, I think, for something like an LMS or any kind of online system where you keep things. Is does it give you the tools to do that in itself, so that you don't have to do all of that work yourself? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly helps to have it already doing that out of the box. I hadn't really thought of this as being a form of gamification, but one of my clients said to me the other day, having posted one of these assignments, she said, I got a real sense of achievement when I completed an assignment and posted it. And so I wondered if that was in itself a form of gamification.
Yeah, I think you can think of it that way. Again, I think people often think of very slight things as this, as something other totally. But in a way, it's not slight in terms of the experience for them, and it's that similar kind of experience for that you get in games when you complete a level or you get an achievement. And again, if you're just focusing on that as something to inspire what you do in your program and how you get people to learn, then I think absolutely you can say, we're going to make something out of this. We're going to say this is an achievement when you've done it. Congratulations, well done. It's something to aim for, and it's something to be pleased with, and it's something to chart on that progress. On that progress map. Definitely.
Okay, and something else that I've got that I think is somewhat gamified is this before and after quiz. So at the beginning, I asked people to benchmark what their current situation. So this particular quiz here is to do with how they're connecting with people, what their strategy is for connecting, how they engage with people, how they nurture, and how they convert. And then at the end of the program, there's another quiz that asks very similar questions. They're not exactly the same, but they are quite similar. And what that means is that they get a printout of their answers to these quizzes, and they've got a straight comparison of where they started off and where they are now. So again, it's another way of them measuring their progress.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the more different ways you've got, the more you are, again, tapping into that thing that games do really well, which is you don't just have, your score. Usually you've got your score, you've got which level are you on. If you've got a character, it's often, how much experience does it have, or it gets new skills. And here you are talking about people's skills and approaches. So having a visual and a solid way to chart where they started, where they are, and where they're going, I think is huge. And it's definitely something we can take as inspiration from games.
This is something that's very popular, and it's part of this business vision roadmap module. This is how I encourage people to create their business vision. And this is a Miro board where they can put their 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year vision. And they do this by they're answering these questions down the left here, but they can grab these little virtual post-it notes, pop them on the chart there, and then type in what their answer is to the particular piece that they're going to. And there seems to be something about it's like if we were doing this live in a training room, we give everyone a piece of flip chart paper and a bundle of post-it notes, and they'd be sticking them on there. And so the Miro board seems to recreate that in the virtual environment quite well.
Yeah. And again, it's an example of something where you could just see it as an extension, as you say, of a traditional training activity, but you can also see, and I'm sure this is part of why it appeals to people, that this is very much like a kind of game board, and it's a space that they can explore, that they can make their own, and that it's going to chart progress, and that they can develop as they themselves develop.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it like that, but there is an element of that, isn't there? That you can visually see it becoming more complete as the activity goes on.
Yeah, and there's this huge growth, this spurt in canvases. You got the business model canvas and all these other canvases, and I think that that's partly what's fueling those as well, the popularity of those.
Yeah. Okay. So those are at least that's what I can think of so far as to what kind of gamification elements there are already in the program. Yeah, I'm just interested in what suggestions you might have for improvement.
Yeah, and I'd love to give you some. I mean, there are some particular areas where you think there could be improvement, some particular parts of the program or ways that it's done where you'd like to see maybe a little bit more variety, or where gamification could fit in.
Something that I've noticed and that I'm kind of aware of is that most of the lessons they're very similar. So it's watching me explain something on a video and then going to an assignment. Apart from that one assignment that has that Miro board, the other assignments are all very similar. It's kind of download this template, answer these questions, complete it and submit it. So I'm just wondering what options there are for creating some variation and mixing it up a bit.
I think that's a really big one actually for people who are doing this kind of course. So when it's not live, it's the kind of just the way these courses are often done, video, something for people to fill in, and that's partly because it's just the easiest way to do things, just slip into that naturally. And it can be really effective. But as you say, it can get a bit samey after a while, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think, if we think about some of the things that games do well, and I've got a kind of framework that I've developed around the things that games do well called the 6 levers of games-based learning. And the first of those levers, and I use this idea of a lever as some way that we can kind of lever, use our strength and multiply our strength. In terms of what the effort that we're putting in, but the result that we're getting back. The first of those levers is put the learner at the center. And I think, if we're thinking about trying to put the learner at the center, well, how do games do that? Well, they tend not to start with the how-to, with the instructional. You don't start a video game and then get a big 5-10 minute video on how to play. You get stuck in the action and they teach you how to play by making you do one thing, and then maybe you don't do it perfectly, but you find out how you're doing it wrong, and a bit of trial and error or some just-in-time instructions. So I think that kind of can inspire a lot of just switching things about, rather than going with the video first and then the activity, which is again really, really common and really understandable. But I think if you can look for opportunities to switch that about and say, okay, can we get people doing something, and then there's something that they've done, while it might not be perfect, we can give them a little bit of instruction on it in steps, or some feedback that enables them to get it a bit more right. And I think sometimes that can seem a bit counterintuitive to people, because they're like, well, if I'm an expert and I know how to do things, why shouldn't I just pass on that expertise and then get people to copy it? And that can be great. But just there's a power, I guess, in just putting them into it and getting them to kind of work through it for themselves. There's any power for learning, I think.
I really recognise that actually, and it's reminding me of is that I had flying lessons for a little while, and I remember my first lesson. I got in the plane with the instructor, and I was expecting him to take off, and he pulled the throttle out to set the plane rolling off down the runway, and then he said, "Okay, so just pull back on the stick," and it was really not what I was expecting. I was like, "What, me?" But I guess one of the reasons that works so effectively is because you're allowing people to get some satisfaction for what they're already doing well. So if even if they don't, as you said, even if they don't do it perfectly, they may actually know how to do some of it. So it avoids patronizing people by teaching them to suck eggs, because you're building on what they can already do and then showing them how to do it better or how to go further with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the other levers?
Well, I can list them all out to you, but I won't list all of them, but I'll give you examples. So things like let learners explore and let learners fail, for instance, which can link. They all link quite strongly into that first one, but they're kind of more specific, branching out from it. So let learners explore is often in contrast to just a linear kind of progress that actually you can say, well, there's a bunch of different ways you could go. Or let learners fail is, often we think of failure as a bad thing, but actually failure is what leads to most of our learning in life in many ways, most of our most effective learning anyway. So yeah, it's taking principles like that, because games do those things really well, and saying, well, where can we figure out a way to make them happen in learning?
Yeah. And I guess part of that is, and this is something that I really focus on doing with my programs, is creating a psychologically safe environment where people feel confident to fail, because they know that they're failing in that safe environment, that it's not going to have the consequences it would have if they were failing in inverted commas, the real world.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think it's really well brought up, actually, because sometimes I think, again, being inspired by games, which is by the way, how I define gamification, it's not about making things have buzzers and bells and whistles. It's about being inspired by what games do well and using it in the right way, in the right context. It's sometimes just about an attitude or an approach like that, like, it being safe to fail is okay.
Yeah, it's like the kind of sandbox principle, I guess, isn't it? Where this is an environment where you can test things out and you can try things out, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, because you've got a supportive community around you that can help you to recover from that and to learn from it.
The other thing I was just going to mention on your varying things up, I think the other thing that can lead people when they're creating a course, distance learning, online video learning, lead people down that path is that those are the tools that are available. They know how to, and they've got the tools to record a video or to create a document that people work through. But there are so many tools out there that can help you to do more things in that distance kind of learning context. So, for instance, if you take the game principle of branching paths, which is this idea that we can take choices, and you see it in all kind of video games and lots of different games. You take a choice, you have consequences, and that's a huge learning thing, because if there are no consequences, then it's just not as deep. It doesn't go as deep for people. There are a lot of programs out there that can really help you with that. So, for instance, there's an app, Maze Tech, that I've used quite a few times, and I'm using it to develop a course at the moment, actually, where you can structure it all. It's very intuitive. There's no coding. But you can create this whole branching narrative, essentially, that you're guiding people through, and they're it's recording scores if you like, or you can leave scores out of it and just have it as a kind of narrative thing. But they're having to deal with the consequences of their actions as they go through a scenario.
And I'm reminded of there's that Black Mirror episode, isn't there, Bandersnatch, where you could choose. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? Where you can?
Yeah, that's a great example of it.
Oh, that's a brilliant concept. I'd really never thought of using a tool like that to create those kind of options. I guess that's something that'd be really interesting to explore a bit further. Okay. Anything else? And what about the assignments?
I think sometimes those kind of things can just be about the framing. So when we use the word assignments, again, it's a very natural word to use. But if you think about things that can just A, make it seem a little bit more exciting, but B, actually give it a different complexion, because as soon as you're thinking about it, something different to an assignment, then you'll set it up in a slightly different way. So for instance, and you don't have to use any of these, but these are just examples, quests, the idea of having a quest where you're questing out to find things, whether it's to find them on the internet or find them within a body of information that you've given them, or just a quest to fulfill a challenge in the best way possible, given their imagination and their resources and their learning. So that's kind of one framing. Or something like, for instance, an escape room kind of framing. So you think of an escape room, a physical one, quite a big setup, lots of puzzles, lots of difficult things. But actually, I've seen some really effective and created some escape rooms just using Google Forms or something like that, where you're actually kind of just using the branching logic on Google Forms, or whether they give the answer right or not, to take them to a certain other place, and just setting them kind of simple puzzles or quizzes within that context. And again, both from your side of things in terms of creating it, but also from their perception, just gives that slightly different kind of direction and flavor and a bit of variety, I think, as well.
Yeah. And I think that's another great example of what you were saying earlier, that I think sometimes when we think about gamification, we think it's all got to be highly technical and very complicated. But what you're advocating is that it's really the principles of gaming that are important, and you can actually use some fairly mundane and readily available tools to create the games themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I'm glad that you talked about the principles, because I think one of the other things that I would recommend to anybody who's thinking about incorporating gamification principles in their own work is to not just kind of try and come up with ideas from a blank sky, but to use the frameworks that are out there. So, for instance, one of the frameworks that I was kind of trained on as part of my development in my field was the Octalysis framework developed by Yu-Kai Chow, and I think it's a great 8-part framework to look in 8 different directions about things, again, that categories taken from games. Games do these things well. So one of them, for instance, is social influence. You know, a lot of games have, and particularly video games, have a setup where, you know, you are part of a community, and being part of that community means certain things in terms of what you would tend to do, because you're thinking about how you're seen by other members of that community. And once you start looking into that and taking principles from that, it just really helps you with things like, for instance, if you're thinking about your assignments, you could be thinking about, okay, can we have a forum, which is not exactly a novel idea, but also how is that forum set up? And is it set up in a way where it encourages people to feel safe to post and then to comment on each other's, not just, oh, please comment on other people's stuff, but what's the motivation to comment on people's stuff? And can we, try and give them reasons to comment, and maybe little achievements or awards or recognition of some kind when they do comment on each other's stuff, or make it a requirement that they do comment on at least a certain number. All these kind of ideas that just build it out from this basic thing of, oh, put it on a forum and hopefully people will comment on it.
Yeah, so to give them a little bit more motivation, a bit more of a reason why they would comment on it, as a way of encouraging that kind of social community spirit.
Yeah, and posting it in the first place, as well as commenting on it.
On the topic of motivation, apart from the intrinsic joy of learning, which motivates people to keep going, and things like the game plan and check-in calls that I have with people, and the live coaching and the community aspect to it. What other ideas are there for motivating people? Because it can be, it can feel like, and there's no doubt about it, is additional work, isn't it? Going through programs like this, and people's motivation naturally can flag at times. What are the sort of game principles that seem to work effectively for that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I've just been talking about the Octalysis framework, actually. So let me talk about another one of the 8 categories there, which is around accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So I think, if you start to think about what are all the different things that tend to make people feel accomplished, and how can we make people feel a sense of accomplishment? A, that they know it's in their future, they can work towards it. But B, once they get there, they get that little buzz from having gotten there and they want to do it again. And I think that, one of the traditional ways of doing that in kind of gamification is, for instance, by kind of achievements or badges, which again work really well in games. You get all these achievements of not just complete the game, but also do this certain thing within a game. And if you've done that certain thing and done it in a particular way, then, it's something people really value. So I think they can be really effective, but I also think sometimes they're just like a number of gamification things, actually, they can be applied in a bit of a slapdash kind of way, which makes them not effective. So people just might put a bunch of achievements up on a page, or implement a system of badges and say, you get a badge for this, you get a badge for this. And the people doing the course look at them and say, I'm not motivated by that. I don't want that badge. It's like employee of the month at McDonald's or something. People don't necessarily want it. But if you think it's true and think, well, what do people care about? What are the things, for instance, that this is helping them to achieve in the real world? And if you put some kind of achievement to aim for in place that not only means something within the context of the course, but it means that they're going to be able to now have the skill to go and use that in the real world, for instance.
Yeah. So for example, it could be something like got 100 new LinkedIn connections or something like that.
Yeah, great, fantastic.
So and I really want to capture what you've just said, because I think the really key thing is that not just that it makes sense within the confines of the course, the kind of rarefied atmosphere of the training environment, but that it's also meaningful in the rest of what they're using the skills in order to do. Yeah,
absolutely, definitely. It links into the ideas around intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation. They don't just want the badge; they want the badge because it's meaningful.
That it actually helps them accomplish something.
You can also think of a number of things there around, how is it going to be implemented? Like where will they gain it or display it? How will people know that they've got it? Sometimes it's not just the what, it's the how it's done.
Something that really springs to mind is that I've got kind of live office hours calls and group coaching calls as part of the program, and that seems like a real opportunity for celebrating success and publicly celebrating people's achievements. What else could I be doing on those live calls that might utilize some gamification principles?
Again, I'm just thinking about some of the things that games do well, and I'm thinking about another framework here, which is Andrzej Marczewski's periodic table of game elements, where he's kind of pulled out a bunch of game elements and put them in a kind of table, inspired by the periodic table, and all different kind of things. Some of them which are very kind of gamey, like boss battles or equipment or something like that. But some of them I think are really generalizable as well. I'm thinking now about the idea of levels, for instance. So one of the big motivators in a lot of games is you can see where you are in terms of like an experience level or a level of the game, and you can also see where you've got to go. So I'm wondering if for your calls, for instance, you could start to have something which is there, visual, if it's a video call, and you say, okay, level 1 is, and then you describe it. Actually, this is what you can achieve as individuals, perhaps as a group, depends how it's working for you. Yeah. If you're a level 1 at this skill or this topic that we're looking at. But if you get to level 2, then you'll be able to achieve these things. And if you get to level 3, you'll be able to achieve these things. And then not only can that be like, and you don't have to literally award this stuff. You don't have to say, look, you're on level 2, you're on level 3. You can just have it there and use it as a focus and as a topic of conversation. Where do you think you're at? What would it take you to get to level 3? Where do you want to be? Where do you think you'll be in 6 months?
The other thing that I wanted to chat with you about, Terry, and raise with you is that there are 2 or 3 kind of common mistakes that I see people making, and it'd be interesting to understand how gamification might be able to somewhat mitigate those errors. So a very common one is unrealistic planning. So I showed you the game plan earlier on, that people sometimes are too ambitious with thinking what they can do when. And then they start to fall behind. And I always encourage them when they get into that stage. And something that I found is very helpful actually for a lot of people is to say, okay, don't stay behind, redo the plan so that looking forward, it's always achievable. Whereas, but sometimes people don't do that. And so they have this kind of feeling that they're behind their own schedule.
It's interesting. I think, again, I often think in terms of frameworks and try and use them for inspiration and bring those principles across. I'm thinking now about one of the simplest, actually, and one of the ones that I think, because it's simple, it can be really powerful. And that's BJ Fogg's behavioral model, which model makes it sound really academic. It's really not. It's just this idea that you can kind of map out, if you want a certain behavior from people, it's going to happen when they've got 3 things. They also call it B equals MAP. And it's going to happen when it gets, when you're going to get the behavior B, when you've got 3 things happening together, which are that they've got the motivation, they've got the ability, and they've got the prompt. And so you can kind of see it as a kind of graph between motivation and ability, that if they're lacking on either one of those, then they won't be in the right place on the graph. But also, if they're in the right place, if they've got the motivation, they want to do it, they think it's worthwhile, but also they know how to, they've got the skill, they still probably, for most people, need a prompt at that right moment when it's an easy time or when it's a time they can do it. So I wonder if, for this thing of reflowing their plan, whether you can think about those 3 variables. This is a bit of what goes on under the hood, I guess, in gamification. But think about those 3 variables and think, okay, is it the motivation? In which case, can we work on that? Is it the ability? In which case, can we work on that? Or is it just the prompt, that just finding the time when they're actually going to do it and making sure that they're thinking about doing it at that time?
That's really interesting. And straight away, if I think of specific individuals who've got into that situation, then what occurs to me is that it may well be the prompt that might make the difference, because they're motivated and they're able to do it. All the activities are relatively simple to do. They want to get more clients, so they're motivated to do it. It's just that sometimes life gets in the way. It's that sort of all the other activities they've got to do. But something as simple as an email or a text message or something like that says, "Hey, what are you doing for your training business accelerator today?" Would that be an example of the kind of thing that might just prompt them into taking more action?
Yeah, absolutely. But also thinking again about exactly how and when, because if you do that at a time of day when they're likely to be knee deep, elbow deep in work, then it's just going to get ignored. But if you catch them at the right time of day, Duolingo is a really good example of a lot of gamification principles. But one of the things that they do well is those prompts, because not only are they thinking about that stuff, and they do a lot of data crunching to get to what is the best time of day to send these kind of things out, and what's the best way to phrase them to make it easy for people to say, yes, that sounds doable. But also they get users to sign up and say, well, how when do you want notifications? What kind of notifications do you want? Which not only is using that information to focus them, but also is makes it more likely that user is going to actually respond because this is something they asked for. You know?
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea, and very easy to copy. So I could just ask people, what's the best time of day to communicate with you, and what are the best days of the week? And that'd be really useful, actually, because it does vary, particularly with trainers, on the type of training they're doing. So if they're doing full day workshops in person, then they may be in the training room for the whole of a day, and they're usually long days. They might have to travel there and travel back afterwards, spend time with the client, don't get many breaks during the day, so they're too tired and too busy to do anything at all on a day like that. Whereas other trainers, if they're doing online workshops that are only an hour or two at a time, then they're more likely to have time during the day. And so it's when you were saying getting the time of the day right, I was thinking, how would you do that? And it's like a face palm moment. It's as simple as just asking them, when's the best time of day to, and which are the best days of the week to communicate with you. And yeah, we've got simple automation tools like automated email that make it very simple to automate that, so that they can automatically be sent an email prompt at a particular time of day that they've said is convenient. And I also see that the effect of asking them is also getting them to actually give permission, to give permission to contact them at that time of day. So they're much more likely to respond to it. This has been really fascinating, Terry. And one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is and this is another example of it, is that it doesn't have to be complicated. It can actually be very, very simple. But it's really understanding what are the principles that we can take from games, and how can we use those principles in the design of our learning.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge for me. I think one of the things that actually hampers me sometimes in my work is perceptions of gamification and games-based learning as complex or as necessarily something just for people who enjoy games. But actually, if we're taking it just as, games is a hotbed of pushing buttons and finding motivators and making certain things happen rather than certain other things, then we can draw all kinds of motivation from that. Inspiration from that looks and sounds and feels A, not complex, and B, nothing like games, but is effective in doing whatever we want. And learning is a particularly, I think, ripe ground for that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've really got my work cut out for me from the insights that you've given me today, Terry. What should people do if they want to get to know your work better or get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I've got my website at untoldplay.com. And you can sign up there for my mailing list, which is weekly, updates on games-based learning ideas and news and links. You can also get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Really happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. And my blog is also on untoldplay.com, and there's weekly content there around different games-based learning and gamification topics.
That sounds fantastic. And as for me, I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I've also developed a trainer and coach marketing scorecard, which trainers and coaches can use to benchmark their current marketing activity and get personalized feedback on ways to improve to bring more of their ideal clients into one-to-one conversations. And that's at www.tinyurl.com/trainer-scorecard. And so anybody who wants to do that, it's free. It only takes 5 minutes. It's a series of 20 questions. It gives you some really good insights into things that you can do straight away to bring more clients into your business.
Sounds great. This has been really enjoyable, Murray. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it too. Thanks a lot, Terry.